Hello and welcome. Here I review movies, and today, in preparation for the upcoming remake of The Crow, I decided to watch the original from 1994. It's a superhero action film based on the comic book of the same name by James O'Barr. Eric Draven and his fiancée Shelley are celebrating the night before their wedding when a group of criminals breaks into their apartment and murders them. A year later, Eric Draven awakens in the cemetery and seeks out vengeance for their deaths. David J. Show and John Shirley adapted the story into a screenplay, and Alex Proyas directed the film. It stars Brandon Lee as Eric Draven, Ernie Hudson as Officer Albrecht, and Michael Wincott as Top Dollar. Alright, positives first. The best thing about this film is the visuals. They did a wonderful job with the atmosphere, the sets and costumes, and with the visual effects. The graphics don't all hold up, but the practical effects tend to look pretty good still, and there was a lot of creativity involved. The regeneration effects and some of the wounds they gave him with makeup and prosthetics were especially well done. One of my favorite scenes was him holding up his hand and laughing at them through the bullet holes. It got across how psychotic he was and terrified his enemies at the same time. The story is a straightforward revenge tale. They set up the plot quickly, draw on a few big emotions, and then spend the rest of the time reveling in the action. There are little things you can nitpick, but the story is fairly consistent and tight across the board. The acting is solid with many good performances from the supporting cast. The villains are nasty and unforgivable, but do a good job of acting terrified when the Crow appears. And the cops and normal folks seem perturbed by the whole lot of them. Ernie Hudson and the villain Michael Wincott both stood out for how charismatic they came across on screen. Ernie Hudson plays a cop investigating Eric Draven's murder, and he spends time looking after Sarah, a street urchin that Shelley cared for. He acts as the emotional straight man of the film and does a good job with his reaction to the Crow. Hudson adds a little bit of humor to the role with great comedic timing and also gets to be an action hero toward the end. He's charismatic and you want him to win. Michael Wincott doesn't get much screen time, but with each second he creates a violent and psychopathic villain. You never quite know how he feels about a situation, like he could pop off at any moment. His character is a bit stereotypically evil, but he plays the emotions well and creates a cool persona. The soundtrack also does a good job of supporting the emotional journey and creating a flavorful vibe for the film. They used alt-rock tracks with a lot of guitar riffs to help create a grungy atmosphere and lots of churchy instrumental tracks for big action scenes and tense moments. It wasn't the most memorable music, but it was unique. Now that I've been over the positives, let's address the negatives. To start, I want to say that it sucks that Brandon Lee died, and I'll try to be as respectful as possible. But this film does have problems, and his performance is one of them. His acting is a little bit stiff across the board, and he never quite manages to pull off the extreme emotions his character holds. He does alright when he's playing the superhero version of Eric Draven. He's a bit playful and puts out some good presence against the other actors, but when it comes to delivering his lines, he never quite gives them the gravity they deserve. He always sounds monotone, like he's reading off a teleprompter. He's also asked to physically act out his character's mental anguish and pain, but his performance just comes off as hokey. The story also doesn't have any stakes. The Crow can't die for the first hour of the film, and when they finally do introduce a weakness, it gets used immediately and ends up not mattering at all anyway. There's no tension, you never feel like he can lose, and they only bring in other characters for stakes near the very end of the conflict. The characters are all somewhat cliché too. There's two good guys who can do no wrong and say all the right things, and then there's a bunch of gangsters who are constantly trying to one-up each other to prove they're king batshit. It's a little boring in that regard. Some of the film's action sequences don't hold up. There are a lot of fast-paced quick cuts and shaky camera work, and it tends to take place in dimly lit locations. The fights don't look good, and it's not always clear what's going on. They also abuse slow motion several times. Overall, The Crow has a decent premise, some cool effects, a solid soundtrack, and a great cast. It does have some bad acting and a few outdated visuals, and the story could use some better stakes, but it's an entertaining film. As for a rating, I'd give this film a 6 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye.